The Gorgon is perhaps one of the most iconic monsters in all of mythology. The most famous of all Gorgons is, of course, Medusa, the monster who turned all who met her gaze into stone, until she was beheaded by the hero Perseus. Now, a Gorgon is meant to be a woman with snakes for hair and sometimes wings, though many depictions actually paint them having the lower halves of serpents as well. This is probably due to Gorgons getting mixed up with the snake-human hybrids from Hindu mythology, known as Nagas, but that's a rabbit hole, or snake hole, I guess, that we won't go any further into right now. Anyways, just like how they casually added the Minotaur into their game, Riot decided that they needed a Medusa stand-in as well. Thus, on December 14th, 2010, we got Cassiopeia added to the game, who, despite being based on Medusa, was named after an entirely different mythological figure for some reason. But who does she take after most in terms of backstory? Well, no one, really. Cassiopeia is actually the younger sister of Katarina, and a member of the Ducoteau family. The Ducoteaus are a clan of assassins in Noxus, the best in the business, and their current generation consists of 3 children, Katarina, Cassiopeia, and their adopted brother Talon. While Cat and Tal are more of your typical skulking in the dark type of assassins, Cassiopeia was something of a femme fatale. She used her wiles to seduce her targets, lure them to bed, pry out their secrets, then possibly execute them after the whole thing was said and done. One day, Cassiopeia was assigned to gather information from a Freljordian diplomat, though he refuses to tell her anything until she swears an oath of secrecy on this peculiar serpentine blade. Naturally, Cassiopeia breaks the oath by informing their father of everything she learned from the guy and is suddenly overcome with a curse that turns her into a hideous snake monster. The curse even drove her into a blind frenzy that didn't end until she'd murdered all her servants. Given that it was more or less impossible to continue playing the Seductress game as a snake monster, Cassiopeia wound up joining the League of Legends, serving her country the only way she still could, while hoping that the summoners could help her find a way to break the curse. Putting aside the barely explained serpent sword, I think this is probably still the best iteration of Cassiopeia's backstory. Her transformation from gorgeous seductress to horrifying snake monster as a consequence of her own actions and lifestyle works far better with the actual theme that her character is based around, bringing out the inner ugliness that she's always kept concealed beneath a veil of beauty. I have heard the argument that she could stand to look a little more monstrous, that you could have transformed her fully rather than keeping her upper half more or less human, but I don't think that's necessary. I know there are a lot of jokes to be made about fetish fuel and how people on the internet would totally go for that, but being serious for a second, no you wouldn't. No sane human being would encounter a creature like Cassiopeia in real life and not immediately feel a fight or flight response trigger. If a giant snake was coiling around your body and crushing your bones, you would not be saying harder, mommy, like in that god-awful scene from the visual novel. You'd be desperately struggling to escape. Cassiopeia lost her seductive charm when she transformed, but I actually like that she retains some semblance of her human appearance. It lets us see hints of what she used to be, and serves as a reminder to Cassiopeia of what she lost. The new lore, however, takes a very different approach. The basics are the same. Cassiopeia is still the daughter of the Ducoteau clan and winds up using her mind and body as weapons, as opposed to her sister's daggers. The big difference here is that we actually get to learn a lot more about the family as a whole, as well as Cassiopeia's relationship with them. Cass was particularly close to her mother, Lady Soriana. So close, in fact, that when Soriana was nearly poisoned to death by a rival assassin, It was Cassiopeia who stayed by her mother's side throughout her recovery. While Marcus and Caterina would be ordered off to partake in the Ionia campaign, Cassiopeia and Soriana were left closely guarded in the fortress city of Erzeris. It's there that Soriana reveals that she's actually a part of the Black Rose, and has her sights set on Shurima. After recovering fully from the poison, Soriana takes Cassiopeia under her wing, and eventually indoctrinates her daughter into the Black Rose herself. Cassiopeia proves to be a remarkably talented and especially ruthless individual, much to Soriana's delight. Soriana reveals that she's been helping the Black Rose search for ancient, powerful relics scattered throughout Shurima, and now she wants Cassiopeia to join her in that search. Cassiopeia agrees, and on her mother's orders, sets out in the hopes of unearthing the divine power that allowed the Shuriman Empire to conquer an entire continent, the Rite of Ascension. We all know the story from here. Cassiopeia makes her way to the ruined capital and the Tomb of the Emperors with Sivir's help. She literally stabs Sivir in the back, steals the Chalukar that is the key to opening the door, and sets Zareth and Renekton free from their long imprisonment. But just as she does, a random snake statue comes to life, bites her, and causes Cassiopeia to start mutating into a snake monster. Apparently, Cassiopeia escapes all the way back to Erzeris before the transformation is fully complete. At first, she hates what she's become, but over time realizes that this transformation gives her all kinds of crazy snake powers, and decides to fully embrace the transformation. The bio claims that she goes back to working for the Black Rose, though her short story actually has her acting as like a sort of vigilante in the streets of Noxus, chasing down and killing criminals. Okay, I'm just going to get right into it. This version of Cassiopeia starts strong, but falls apart by the end. To start with, the circumstances of her transformation are really weird and vague. The Serpentine blade in her original lore wasn't explained in depth, but it didn't need to be. You could make a promise on it, and betraying that promise turns you into a monster. It was easy enough to understand. But the Guardian Serpent statue raises so many questions. Why is this thing here? What is it exactly? Supposedly it guards the Tomb of the Emperors, but in that case, why does it wait until after the door is already open to lash out? Also, the fact that the Guardian apparently turns intruders into snake monsters rather than just killing them feels like a really poor system to implement in the long term. It doesn't help that this is yet another case of a champion being created or mutated by something that, frankly, should just kill them but doesn't because vague magic. In this case, it's been implied that the venom in the snake statue actually belonged to Naganeka, a former member of the Ascended Host that took the appearance of a serpent. So, does this mean that Cassiopeia is now partially ascended now? It doesn't help that we barely know anything about Naganeka's time or rule as a member of Shurima's demigod protectors. But that's an issue that all the Darkin kinda suffer from, unfortunately. Putting that aside, it has always been so weird to me that Cassiopeia apparently just doesn't interact at all with Zareth or Renekton. You know, the crazy demigod she set free by opening the tomb in the first place? Did she just run away as soon as they came out? Did neither of them want to have a word with the one responsible for ending their centuries-long imprisonment? This lady single-handedly reignites a civil war between semi-divine beings and probably complicates the Black Rose's plans to conquer Shurima as a result. But she just goes right back to them without ever even acknowledging that entire mess. Like I said, the new bio kinda falls apart by the end. It's filled with plot holes, a term that I don't like using lightly, and introduces a myriad of plot points that it just never bothers to explain because I guess we're just expected to figure this stuff out based on, like, treasure hunting tropes. However, the worst crime that Cassiopeia's new lore commits, in my opinion, is that it sort of defeats the initial point of her character. Cassiopeia's transformation is supposed to be a curse, destroying her life and reputation within Noxian high society. It does sort of do that in this version, at first, but then Cassiopeia turns around and fully embraces her new monstrous form because of the myriad of magical powers she gains from it. She says as much in her short story. Once I had to manipulate, bribe, or otherwise persuade people to orchestrate my schemes. But now I simply take what I want. The curse that is meant to be Cassiopeia's punishment for leading a life of deception and cruelty, revealing the monster she kept carefully hidden behind a veil of seductive beauty, is now actively a benefit to her. The Black Rose, who should be furious about Cassiopeia complicating their plans for Shuriman conquest, seem to welcome her back into the fold without much issue. Ultimately, Cassiopeia suffered no truly negative consequences for her actions, which I feel, again, goes against the entire point of her character. What makes this worse is that there's a painfully obvious alternative sitting right there. Have Xerath be the one to transform her. Now, granted, Xerath's ability to create Bakai and turn people into monsters is something that was still only semi-recently established, so I can forgive them for not thinking of it at the time. Still, it was stated in his post-retcon bio that the Magus studied all manner of magic in Shurima's library, including dark magics and curses. So imagine this. What if Cassiopeia actually knew that Xerath was in the tomb? Rather than only having a vague idea of what she's looking for, Cassiopeia actively seeks to free the imprisoned Ascended in the hopes of recruiting them to the Black Rose, or at the very least learning how to attain their power for herself. Perhaps she or someone in the Black Rose uncovered an ancient mural or tablet depicting the fall of Shurima and the battle between Xerath, Nasus, and Renekton that took place so long ago. Cassiopeia sets Xerath free and tries to negotiate with him, hoping to use the fact that she ended his centuries-long imprisonment as a bartering chip. In response, Xerath rewards her by giving her the power she sought, but not in the way she hoped for. He turns Cassiopeia into a monster, as he will go on to do with a number of his acolytes, as both a twisted way of thinking her and punishing her for daring to assume that a mere mortal could demand favors from a self-proclaimed god. While the original bio uses the snake transformation to symbolize Cassiopeia's deceptive nature, this version would lean in more to the idea of a serpent's covetous nature. We could say that Cassiopeia wanted to rise up the ranks of the Black Rose, not simply to please her mother, but to surpass her. Hell, perhaps she even gets the idea in her head about using the power of ascension to usurp the Black Rose itself. Ultimately, though, she bites off far more than she can chew, and suffers the consequences for it. As for where Cassiopeia's story goes from there, well, it could go a number of directions, really. You could have her slowly come to embrace this new monstrous form as before, perhaps even coming to ally herself with Xerath because she knows she can't go back to Noxus like this. Or, a much better direction in my opinion, you could have her seek a cure. I want to draw attention to Cassiopeia's in-game taunt towards Azir, where she tries to coax the Emperor into an alliance, claiming their interests are aligned. Now, in-game taunts and interactions are only pseudo-canon at best, but this one never really made sense to me. How and why would their interests be even remotely aligned? And what makes Cassiopeia think that Azir would even remotely consider allying with her after she, tried to murder his last descendant and set his ancient enemy free. But that presents something of an opportunity. Sivir survived thanks to the Oasis of the Dawn, a magical pool of water hidden beneath the capital that heals all injury and purges all impurities. Perhaps after hiding out in Shuriman ruins for a while, Cassiopeia learns about Sivir's survival, as well as the fact that the mercenary was healed by these sacred waters. Cassiopeia's new goal is set: find a way to reach the Oasis of the Dawn, in the hopes that it might revert Xerath's curse. That's one direction, anyways. As I said before, there are a lot of ways you could interpret Cassiopeia's character and a myriad of places you could take her. But the path that Riot laid out for her character in the Shurima retcon feels so half-baked. Despite being the one to effectively kickstart the Shuriman plotline, Cassiopeia feels almost like an afterthought in it. She gets cursed for her act of greed, kickstarts a civil war between two higher beings, and probably destroys her mother's plans to acquire the power of Ascension, yet somehow winds up in an even better position than where she started in spite of all of that. She has nothing to even strive for now, beyond just continuing to serve the Black Rose with her new snake powers, I guess. But what do you all think? Do you feel like Cassiopeia's new bio is wasted potential, or do you prefer the direction that Riot took for her? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.